Good Friday evening to you from Telesur Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. I'm Regan Devines. Thanks for being here with us on From the South. Continuing his visit to the United States, Pope Francis has spent this Friday in New York City, where he has met with a number of immigrant families in Harlem. Francis, who has made migrant and refugee rights a top priority in his U.S. tour, met with immigrant children and parents from Our Lady Queen of Angels School and reminded them of the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. During his visit to New York City's Latino-majority neighborhood in East Harlem, the Pope spoke in defense of joy and dreaming. Residents called the Pope's visit a recognition of their community, which is often neglected by politicians and policymakers. Earlier in the day, Pope Francis was the first to address the United Nations Sustainable Development Summit. During his speech, he attacked economic and social exclusion, which he described as a total denial of human fraternity. The Pope called on world leaders to boost education for girls and demanded an end to the destruction of biodiversity. The pontiff also denounced the, quote, unlimited desire for power and material well-being, which has led to the suffering of the poor around the world.
The international financial agencies should care for the sustainable development of countries and should ensure that they are not subjected to oppressive lending systems which, far from promoting progress, subject people to mechanisms.
Before arriving to New York, Pope Francis was in Washington, D.C. In a show of support, environmentalists gathered to deliver the pontiff's message to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Bianca Perez was there, and she has these details.
Rejoicing over the Pope's message to the government, members of various environmental organizations concluded an 18-day fast by gathering outside the offices of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to demand that no more fracking permits be issued in the U.S.
We're hoping to move the political system to do the right thing instead of building more infrastructure for fossil fuels, to put the emphasis on renewables.
One of my goals is to get FERC to be more cooperative and to let the people have a voice in our electricity policies in the country.
The United States stands out as the country that has the most carbon reserves in the world. Activists continue to stress the need to move toward alternative energy options.
We should not be expanding the infrastructure for gas or coal or oil. Those are all the fossil fuels that are hurting people right now, poisoning land, poisoning water, poisoning air. We need to be moving rapidly as possible to renewable energy.
The Pope's message to Congress, as well as his message to the United Nations regarding the risks of environmental destruction, gave hope to environmentalists that his words will be heard and new policies will be implemented.
And he is a very serious moral leader, and we need to see what we do as moral choices. And our actions here are taking that moral choice to very specific demands and changes that we need to do.
Though the U.S. has only 4% of the world's population, the country consumes 25% of fossil fuels and is the nation with the most gas emissions. The Pope's encyclical, released in May, has brought the issue of climate change to the forefront of his agenda and has challenged the United States to find lasting solutions to the problem. Bianca Perez, Telesur, Washington, D.C.
And for more now on the Pope's visit to the United States and his speech at the United Nations, we turn live now to our correspondent, Bianca Perez. Hi, Bianca. Tell us more about the Pope's speech today in the UN. We understand that some of his messages were interpreted as anti-capitalist. What has been the reaction there?
Hi, Regan. How are you? Yes, after his speech at the UN, a few media outlets and a few people have spoken out. They do believe that, some of the things that were mentioned during his speech can be labeled as anti-capitalist. He mentioned throughout his speech the trickle-down theory. He opposes this theory. To explain a little bit about what the theory entails, it's essentially that by making the rich very rich, the wealth will eventually trickle down to the poor, making them rich as well. It is a very old theory that is used in capitalist systems, and this was something that he condemned, and a large portion of the reason why people were criticizing him. However, a lot of other people believe that there's not a better time for a message like the Pope's to be given to the UN. He spoke of equality, he spoke of justice, and right now with the situation that has been occurring in the U.S., the economy, a lot of people here in the U.S. want change, and they were very excited to hear that the Pope is being a voice for that, and they were hopeful that his message will be heard and it will be applied in the future here in the U.S. So although some people did criticize him and label him as anti-capitalist, a lot of the general public was very excited to hear. It was a breath of fresh air for some, in a way.
Definitely a Pope of the people after all. What about his meeting with the immigrant families in Harlem? What did he speak about, and what do you think the significance was as it ties in to the immigration reform issue?
Yes, so after his speech in the UN, he went to his school in East Harlem, and he met not only with immigrant families but with some students as well. So it was a mixed crowd, and his speech there was about immigration reform. It was he read a book to the children, or he told it in a story way so that they would understand a little bit the significance of immigration. He spoke of how immigrants can make the society stronger in a way that would make the children understand why they are an important aspect of society. And it was something really relevant because, as we all know, there's a very large immigration reform battle going on here in the United States. So the Pope's message comes in a time when it's critical. The immigrant families felt very touched by his message. They identified with him as an immigrant himself, and they felt that it was great that he would bring this to such younger generations, so that the little children that were present at the time were able to understand more of what immigration entails and how immigrants are important and should be welcomed to the United States, and open their minds in that sense.
Bianca, do you know what's next on the Pope's agenda?
Yes, the Pope will be leaving for Philadelphia tomorrow morning. He will be arriving around 9 a.m. in Philadelphia. He will be having a mass, and in the afternoon, he will be parading down the Benjamin Franklin Parkway, where people will get an opportunity to catch a glimpse of him, as they have in the two other cities, New York and Washington, D.C., which he has previously visited. He will then be having a meeting in the evening. He will visit the Independence Mall, and this will be attended by 50,000 people who have tickets to enter this. And it is expected, it's important to note, that he will be speaking on immigration there. The population in that area particularly is a lot of immigrant families, and he will be addressing those issues there, and it should be a very significant speech, to say the least.
Bianca, I can't tell you enough how much I love what you're doing there. Thank you so much for following this story. I hope you get some rest. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Regan. Have a good weekend.
Thanks. Marking the one-year anniversary of the forced disappearance of the 43 Ayotzinapa students, the families and classmates of the youth carried out a 43-hour hunger strike, which will roll over into the mass demonstrations on Saturday. Although a year has passed, the students and families say truth and justice still seems far off. Our correspondent Clayton Conn is in Mexico with more.
They came in showing no sign of fatigue. The parents of the disappeared 43 Ayotzinapa students finished a 43-hour fast as they prepare for the mass march to mark 1 year since their children were disappeared by police in the state of Guerrero.
We're not going to get tired, even though we continue to march in the streets, in downpours, under the sun, at night. We never sleep. We have hardly rested. We don't eat. But when we are at our dinner tables, that pain a mother feels and what we feel for our children pushes us to continue with the movement.
A week earlier, classmates of the missing said that this past year of pain, rage, and protest will not stop their goal of graduating and becoming critical teachers. They believe, however, that the Mexican state has other plans.
Nosotros We know that we continue to be in the crosshairs, that Ayotzinapa was not an isolated case. It wasn't born out of chance. Although we did not expect such a brutal response, we knew that the state would try to eliminate this school.
They commemorated this year with a solidarity photo exhibit celebrating the lives of the 3 students that were confirmed killed on the night of September 26. Family members and activists continue to express their primary demand, the return alive of the missing 43, with a reference to Che Guevara. They paid their homage.
We need people to work together, criticize less, to build more and destroy less, promise less, resolve more. People should expect to receive less and give more, and to say it's better to do it now than tomorrow.
Meanwhile, the parents of the missing youth assert that this past year has been filled with sharp lessons. They say their previous distrust of the state has transformed into disdain.
Unfortunately, some people only open their eyes when something happens. We're living in the flesh the aggression of this Mexican government.
While President Peña Nieto did offer a special prosecutor to investigate disappearances, the families and classmates demand that a new special unit, overseen by international experts, is formed to specifically investigate the Ayotzinapa case and to deliver truth and justice to the families. Clayton Khan, Telesur, Mexico City.
As we mentioned at the top of the show, the United Nations General Assembly is currently meeting in New York City, where sustainable development is on the agenda. Now, the meeting is focusing on an ambitious set of global goals to end extreme poverty by the year 2030 and to promote health and education. The General Assembly will also discuss climate change. The 70th Assembly General of the United Nations is being attended by over 160 heads of state, including many from Latin America. Evo Morales, during his speech, pointed the finger at capitalism as the culprit of poverty and environmental destruction.
So capitalism uses the environment, it plunders natural resources and destroys the environment. Capitalism uses economics for the sake of politics. Capitalist economics operates through the dictatorship of a financial system which helps the banks and robs the poor.
And for her part, the President of Chile, Michelle Bachelet, spoke of her country's education reform and gender equality as building blocks for development.
What is important is that now is the time to act, to ensure that our national efforts coincide with the 17 Global Sustainable Development Goals. And Chile is already carrying out reforms. It's not easy, but we shall continue to work to guarantee quality education with universal coverage to achieve real gender parity, to ensure our development is in harmony with the environment, and to balance relations between employers and workers. In other words, to create a sound foundation for social cohesion.
One of the most remarkable developments in European politics has been the election this month of a long-time socialist, Jeremy Corbyn, as leader of the British Labour Party. Several 100,000, mainly young people, joined the party to vote just for him, and tens of thousands more have joined since his victory. Telesur's Stephanie Kennedy has been talking to Corbyn about his principles and his plans. Here's a taste of that interview.
The mandate I've got is for a different way of doing politics, is for democratic inclusion, is for open policy making, is for developing ideas from the grassroots, and it's gained a fantastic response. Our audiences were either young people, a lot of them under 25 or 30, or much older people who become disillusioned with British politics, particularly after the invasion of Iraq, and now saw an opportunity for something different. My background.
Corbyn is also the chairperson of the Stop the War Coalition in Britain. He told Telesur that he was utterly opposed to any Western bombing in Syria, which has only strengthened groups like ISIS.
All wars start from the failure of politics. All wars are ultimately ended by the re-engagement of politics. Think of the war in Colombia. It's gone on for as many years as I can remember. Ultimately, a peace process came about by political action. Political action has to be taken in the Middle East. Therefore, a conference urgently called of all the countries in the region, including Russia and Iran, as well as the European Union, the USA, Turkey, has to happen to stop the flow of arms to ISIL, stop the flow of money to ISIL, and to try and bring about some future. At the moment, the options that we're being told by the military are to bomb. Bombing will kill people, will destroy infrastructure, and ultimately will probably lead to more people, not less people, joining ISIL. All the experience so far of all the bombing that's happened in Syria on ISIL targets has been an increase in people wanting to go there and join ISIL. There has to be a different way of doing things.
And you can actually see the full interview with Jeremy Corbyn later this evening on our website, telesurtv.net/English. Moving on now, Volkswagen has appointed a new CEO following the scandal over the company using special software to cheat emissions testing in the United States. The Volkswagen board announced that Matthias Mueller, the head of its Porsche division, would be replacing Martin Winterkorn, who resigned over what is being described as the worst crisis in the company's history. Volkswagen shares have fallen sharply since.
Personally, I will do all I can to win back the trust of our customers, our colleagues, our partners, our investors, and the public at large. We accept our responsibilities.
The creation of a corridor to Austria is the most recent suggestion made by Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán on giving refugees some leeway as they attempt to get to Western and Northern European countries. At a press conference at the Hungarian embassy in Vienna, Orbán said that Europe is divided between countries that wish to put an end to the unrestricted entrance of refugees and those against. Although EU regulations would not permit the so-called corridor, Orbán insists that it should still be a consideration. After a week of tension, Croatia has reopened its border with Serbia. The government in Zagreb closed the crossings on Monday because it said the Serbian authorities were unfairly directing all refugees blocked by Hungary to its own border. Serbia in turn accused Croatia of behaving like a World War II fascist regime. Europe's refugee crisis has brought back memories of the military conflict between Balkan countries 2 decades ago. Israel has imposed firm restrictions on the entry of Palestinians to the Al-Aqsa Mosque prior to the Jewish holiday. Our correspondent Noor Harazin has more.
The Israeli occupation forces deployed thousands of army soldiers and placed its police forces on high alert in Jerusalem's Old Town in preparation for the Jewish holiday Yom Kippur. Eyewitnesses have said that Israeli fears the eruption of security issues between Jewish worshippers and Palestinians during the holiday. It has therefore imposed restrictions on the entry of Palestinians into the Al-Aqsa Mosque in order to ensure security for Jewish prayers. Although Muslims are celebrating the second day of Eid al-Adha holiday, which ends on Sunday, Israel has restricted their free movement into the Holy Mosque for prayers.
These Israeli practices and procedures against the Al-Aqsa Mosque encourage war crimes. They come in the framework of the Israeli policy of the Judaization of Jerusalem in attempt to transfer the city to what they call the capital of the State of Israel. For our people, Jerusalem and the Al-Aqsa Mosque are red lines, so we will defend the Al-Aqsa Mosque by all means. On Friday and during the Al-Eid al-Adha celebrations in Jerusalem, we'll be limited to performing their religious rituals, but the Palestinian people will fight for freedom until they can enjoy their holy lands freely.
In the wake of the clashes, the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, argued the international community and the Arab countries to pressure the occupation state to stop its violations and harassments against Palestinians in East Jerusalem. The director of Occupied Jerusalem Waqf Ministry, Sheikh Azzam al-Khatib, confirmed on Wednesday that banning the entry of Palestinians under 40 years to the Al-Aqsa Mosque means that Israel has actually imposed a temporal division on the Holy Mosque. Noor Harazin, Telesu TV, Gaza.
And now we have a brief of other developing stories making news around the world.
The West African country Burkina Faso held its first cabinet meeting since the end of the coup on Tuesday. The United Nations Security Council welcomed the reinstatement of the transitional authorities. The Council also commended the engagement of the African Union and the Economic Community of West African states that supported the solution there. The last British resident has been released from Guantanamo Bay. Shakir Mer, who was falsely captured in Afghanistan in 2001, was released to authorities from the United States. The U.S. military falsely accused Mer of working for Osama bin Laden and President Barack Obama and his counterpart Xi Jinping held a joint press conference at a summit meeting in Washington, D.C. Both stated that they have made progress in efforts to cooperate on cybersecurity. Obama also stated that the U.S. will be keeping a close eye on China.
And I expressed in candid terms our strong view that preventing journalists, lawyers, NGOs, and civil society groups from operating freely or closing churches and denying ethnic minorities equal treatment are all problematic in our view and actually prevent China and its people from realizing its full potential. Today I want to commend China for announcing that it will begin a national market-based cap-and-trade system to limit emissions from some of its largest sectors. Last year I announced our pledge of $3 billion to the Green Climate Fund to help developing nations deal with climate change. Today I welcome China's major commitment of climate finance for the most vulnerable countries as well.
The Chinese president also provided some details on what has taken place since his visit to the United States.
The two governments and relevant agencies have signed many cooperation agreements, and our businesses have signed a series of commercial contracts. China and the United States are highly complementary economically, and there is huge potential for further cooperation. For the United States to recognize China and its market economy status and use export control on civilian high-tech items, it will help expand the mutual beneficial cooperation between the two countries.
Switzerland's Attorney General has opened a criminal investigation into FIFA President Sepp Blatter. The controversial soccer head was interrogated over suspected criminal mismanagement after chairing a FIFA Executive Committee meeting in Zurich. Blatter faces accusations that he misappropriated funds and violated his duties as the head of the world's football's governing body. And one of Blatter's closest associates at FIFA, the former Vice President Jack Warner, has had his extradition hearing in Trinidad rescheduled to December 2nd. This after Warner's lawyers attempted to have their client discharged. Trinidad and Tobago's Attorney General Faris Alwari only this week signed the order giving the go-ahead for Warner's extradition. Warner was indicted by the U.S. back in May on 12 charges of wire fraud, racketeering, and money laundering. And we end this evening with another developing soccer scandal. The Brazilian striker Neymar has seen $47 million of his assets frozen by a Brazilian court. The Barcelona star is being investigated over alleged tax evasion between 2011 and 2013. There is more on these and other stories on our website, telesurtv.net/English. From our news teams in Quito, Ecuador, and here in Caracas, Venezuela, for Telesur English, I'm Regan Veens. Have a great and safe weekend.